Welcome to Tales Beyond Threads. Dive into the most intriguing Reddit stories from across the internet. Sit back, relax, and let the stories unfold. My mom is making me basically choose between her or BF. I am currently 23 in the process of obtaining my JD/M.S degree, and my BF is 24, works a financial corporate job with his bachelor's. We met when I was 20, and about 5 months into dating, unfortunately, I ended up pregnant and suffered a miscarriage. My parents knew of this, and sadly, that's how they all met. My dad had a 1-1 with my BF and basically used something I confided in my parents about my BF's family against my dad. Basically said, "How do you think I know about XXX? She tells us this." And then also added, "If we were any other type of parents, we would have been knocking on your house door, and that wouldn't have ended up good for your family." Unfortunately, for some time I denied I said anything to them to my BF, and yet he still came around and tried to be on their good side. About 3 to 4 months after this all happened and was said, he was uneasy about the fact they knew and how my dad threw it at him, so he texted my dad to politely ask if they can meet up. My dad and mom blew things out of proportion, calling me at working that my BF was disrespectful and etc. Months later, unfortunately, we broke up BC of this and a few more issues we had. We eventually came back together to try things again, and things have been going great as we've healed from the past things. We came to the conclusion to tell my parents about this, but I kept dragging it out because after that stuff that happened, my mom especially has vocalized her dislike towards my BF, always saying how my BF has manipulated me and that I lack self-love and respect and have lost all my morals and values, along with all the sacrifices she's done to raise me, and that I'm throwing it away for my BF. I ended up telling her we're back together last week and working through things, to which they right away said I've lied to them. BC, I didn't disclose this. My BF has already moved to a different city in our state for work, so he asked me to fly me over so we can talk about how to proceed with how my mom has reacted about us. I told them today this is me being honest and telling you that I'm going to see my BF this weekend in XX city. She flipped out and once again told me that I was breaking her heart and disappointing her. Throwing my future away, I lacked self-love and was being manipulated. That this isn't being an adult, I'm just immature and disrespectful, and my BF is just as bad for not having the balls to come to their house and apologize for how he apparently came across and presented himself when they met and etc. When I initially told her last week, she even threatened to disown me and move back to where we once lived. I feel like I'm caught in the middle when I genuinely just want to be happy and do things on my account, but I'm always being belittled or judged for MT actions pertaining to my BF and I. He also wanted to come around this time with better energy and build a relationship, but he's afraid of the horrible things we know they'll say to him. I know that if I fly to his house this weekend, it won't end good when it comes to my parents. What should I do? Thank you all so far for the advice. It definitely has opened my eyes a bit more. I came here asking for help to make a decision, but ultimately what I needed was just a fresh set of eyes for this, so thank you. As someone who is also dealing with a mom who goes ballistic whenever I mention my partner, I feel for you. That being said, you have to stand up to your parents. Anytime they start talking shit, shut it down. Why would you say something like that? Why would you think I'd appreciate hearing something like that from you, etc.? Having no self-love, self-respect? How are they able to judge that based on your partner? Your mom needs to mind her own business. If you aren't able to stand up to your parents to defend your partner, then why are you with him? Is it because while what they say may be true, you don't care? Or because it's so blown out of proportion, it doesn't make sense? You weren't there when they met for a 1x1. How do you know that either of them is telling the truth? Who do you trust more? Whose side makes more logical sense with what you know of their characters? Why is you getting back together with your partner any of their business? They don't have any right to tell you who you should date. You're allowed to do what you want. Thank you so much. It's something that I've definitely been working on. I spent so much time validating them and their feelings that at some point I even convinced myself I was half of the things they would say. I do love my parents and would never want to tarnish the relationship, especially BC. I have a younger brother, but I also love my partner and the growth we've both shown towards each other. I only know about the 1-1 because my BF recorded for me to hear, and even with that, he's never pushed me away from them as much as they like to tell themselves that he does. He doesn't feel too comfortable coming around now right away, since he now knows they still dislike him, even after all this time. I'm convinced my mom just wants me to live my relationship on her terms. I've cut my mother from my life and I don't know if it was the right thing to do. Either way, I can't help but feel horrible about the situation. I may have posted something about this whole situation at some point in the past few years, not entirely sure, so I'll start from the top, because this whole situation is driving me mad and I need somewhere to vent, since my appointment with a psychologist won't be for another 2 weeks or so. I'm a 22-year-old male that suffers from Tourette's, Asperger's syndrome, ADHD, and anxiety, and lived with my mother up until late 2023, when my dad decided I couldn't live in that house anymore out of the sheer toxicity of my mom. Let me explain a bit. As far as I can remember, my household has always been a very toxic one, from my parents fighting every other day, to my sister bullying the fuck out of me due to my conditions, and finally my brother just being an asshole in general. Things started getting better as I got older though, with my brother and father at least. My brother grew out of being an asshole, and we had a really close bond the last several years before he passed, and my parents got separated, not divorced, almost a decade ago. And I've had a close bond with him ever since. Now, you'd think fighting would stop since my parents got separated, right? Well, they didn't. And I soon realized that the root of all the problems was my mom, 'cause since she couldn't fight with my dad, she started picking fights with my older brother. And then he moved out 'cause he couldn't stand her bullshit, and then she started picking fights with my sister and I, until my sister got a scholarship to go studying abroad in Europe, which in turn led to all my mother's fights being with me, which is where I'll start going into a little more detail. I lived with my mom by ourselves for a good 2 or 3 years, and those were probably the most agonizing years in my life. As I described a little, my mom is one of the most toxic people I know, and she would shout her ass off for anything that wasn't like she wanted it to be, to the point that several times my neighbors called asking what was happening, to the point that they almost called Child Protective Services. Which didn't really work since I was over around 18 or 19 during the time this went down. But I digress. Anytime my mom came home and the dishes weren't washed or my bed wasn't made, she'd shout like a freaking banshee for hours on end, and being that I have a shopping list worth of special needs, I didn't react all that well. And by all that well, I mean I started shouting my frustrations the same way my mom did, and shit would just escalate and I'd end up breaking something. Didn't help that my sister was the same. There was this one time when I wanted to cook dinner, and my sister was also cooking dinner at the same time, and so wouldn't let me cook my dinner until she was finished cooking hers. Both her and I escalated shit, because that's how it always ended, and while I don't remember a whole lot of that fight, I very vividly remember my sister taunting me to beat her. While my mom was a few steps away, saying that she had the phone ready to call the police in case I tried something. This was pretty much my daily life up until September 2022, when my brother was admitted into the ER due to his heart conditions that he's had since he was a few months old flaring up. Unfortunately, he passed away a few days later. Due to our financial situation, we decided to cremate his body instead of burying him, and we planted a tree with his ashes. I would like to note that my mother didn't attend that ceremony. She legitimately got there, handed me my brother's ashes, and left. Didn't even park the car, just sat inside her car in the driveway, and left the second I took his ashes into my hands. I only found the reason for this after the ceremony, that she didn't attend the burial of my brother's ashes because my aunt was there. To give a little context, my aunt was the one my brother called to take him to the ER when his heart condition flared up. Says a lot, doesn't it? My mother and I like 2 blocks away from my aunt, and my brother's apartment was a few miles away, and on the drive to the hospital my brother told my aunt of a lot, and I meant a lot of grievances he had about my mom, and when they got to the hospital, my aunt paid with her credit card. And when my mom got there, she wouldn't let her go in and see my brother, and so a big fight ensued. I don't know the details about that altercation, unfortunately. Before I continue, I would like to say that what my aunt did was completely inexcusable, and she should not have prevented my mom to see my brother. In no way am I excusing her behavior. Anyway, after I found out, I went to confront my mom about why she would let something so infantile from being at the burial of my brother's ashes, so she started dancing around the issue, explaining what really went down, and just trying to justify her actions, really. Again, I don't remember the details of that conversation. Aside from that, my mom ended up sobbing and claiming her children had abandoned her over my aunt. Normally I would blow a fuse over stuff like that, but my brother literally died like 8 hours prior, so I really had no energy for that, and so I ended up leaving and locking myself in my room. A few weeks later, I found out the full story behind my brother's heart condition flaring up. Basically, a few months prior, he had to go back to a lower-paying job due to his higher-paying being so shit that he had an actual panic attack and had to be admitted into the hospital which my mom used her credit card to pay. Having a lower-paying job meant my brother could barely afford his bills or rent, and my mom kept trying to charge him for the credit card usage on his hospital stay, which, as you can imagine, led to a lot of stress, which led to him starting to vomit, and he was vomiting his meds for his heart, which spiraled into being admitted into the ER and, eventually, passing away. Life continued as usual after that, and by as usual, I mean my mom shouting her ass off every other day for anything that she didn't like. Also, while all this was happening, my mom was basically leaving for free, since my dad paid for a good chunk of the stuff at home and I paid for the rest. The things I paid for were food, TV, internet, anything related to taking care of my dog. And despite she never having to pay a dime for anything other than when food ran out a few days before my paycheck, she never, and I mean never, had money when I asked outside of paying for food when we ran out before my paycheck. Like I said, despite having 2 fucking jobs. And despite never having any money, she was able to afford 2 trips to the US and 1 to Europe that year. And when we confronted her about this, she claimed that her friends would cover the entire cost of all the trips. Not to mention that whenever she went out with her friends, which was every fucking day, she would wear clothes that I had never seen on her before. Furthermore, whenever we asked, she would claim that they went to a disco or a bar or a fancy restaurant, and the only thing she ever ordered was a glass or 2 of water. Like I'm not the smartest person around, but this just reeks of bullshit to me. Fast forward a few months of this, and my sister got holidays from her college and so came to visit, so she stayed in her old room in the house. A few days into her stay, and my mom announced that a few friends of hers that lived in the US were visiting, and she invited them to stay over at our place. Problem is, our house didn't have enough spare rooms for them to stay. The solution? Effectively kick my sister out of the fucking house to offer her room over to her friends. Again, a massive argument ensued, of which I remember nothing, and my sister went to stay with my grandma during the remainder of her visit. My mom and my sister haven't spoken to this day because of that. After my sister left, life went on as usual. Until one day, during an argument with my mom, I don't remember about this one either, just that it was about me not washing the dishes. I got so fucking angry that I kinda just blacked out for a few seconds, and when I came out, I had a glass plate on my hand and was about to bash my mom's head in with it. I managed to stop myself, thankfully, but I decided to nope the fuck out of there immediately. Meanwhile, my mom kept taunting me, because she thought I was just about to smash that plate into the wall or something, and locked myself into my room and called my dad, who decided I could not live there anymore, and so we started searching for apartments the very next day. He paid for everything for the new apartment, and I still owe him that money. Thankfully, he told DC me to pay it off if I could, and if I could, well then to not worry about it. And so I started living by myself. My dad paid off the rent, and I paid for everything else, since my income wasn't enough to pay my rent. And I can tell you with the certainty, these have been the best months of my entire life. There was just so much peace, I'd never felt better. Despite this, I still tried to maintain a healthy relationship with my mom. She would visit occasionally and we would have dinner together. Also, after I moved out, my dad decided he could not be bothered to pay shit for my mom to live, and so he stopped paying her bills. I don't know what happened between the two of them during that time, since I didn't get involved in that whole mess. But yeah, life was well and good up until last November, where my mom told me that she had quit one of her jobs. I found it incredibly odd, considering she had mentioned multiple times that she was struggling financially, so her quitting her job just raised a huge alarm that something was going to happen. Turns out I was right. A few months after that, early this year, if memory serves, my dad was hit with a lawsuit of, wait for it, $500,000 USD from my mom for abuse. All of which was fake. Of course, I read the whole thing, but the one single thing that infuriated me to no fucking end was that she said that my dad and his family did not allow her to bury my brother. Yes, you read that right. She did not attend the burial of my brother's ashes and then had the absolute gall to claim it was my dad that didn't let her bury him. I don't think I've ever been so angry or hurt in my entire life. And yet, I tried to not let this get to me, and still tried maintaining a positive relationship with her. Welp, as of 3 weeks ago, I've effectively cut off all contact with her. The reason being that she now had fucking audacity to hit my dad with another lawsuit, this time for a pension. Is that the right word? Not sure it's the direct translation with the Spanish word for $5,000 USD a month. The amount is actually a bit different because she's asking for a mix of USD and the local currency. Of course, my dad can't pay such a ludicrous amount a month, and so she demanded that he stop paying for my rent and give that money to her, which would render me homeless, since with my income I can't pay for rent by myself. Also, some of you might wonder how I can't even pay for my rent. The reason is that my dad specifically picked an apartment with 2 rooms in Cames my sister came to visit, since she is not in speaking terms with my mom, and since I live in a third world country. Minimum wage jobs like mine pay stupidly low, and rent is stupid high. But yeah, after all this, my mom has shown that she gives 0 fucks about anyone but herself, giving that she's willing to make me go homeless. This isn't that big of an issue, because I have a lot of relatives who would be willing to take me in, but she doesn't know that. Because her family doesn't really have any contact with her, either, in order for her to live like a fucking princess while someone else pays for all her shit. But yeah, that's about it. I had to go to a doctor the other day because of this whole clusterfuck making me feel worse than a literal pile of shit. They made me take 2 weeks off work due to mental health and referred me to a psychologist, which I have an appointment with in about 2 weeks. I'm going to be real. I have no idea if this was the right choice. With this, my mom is essentially alone now, and I can't help but feel guilty over it. And yet, I think that this would let me get back on my feet at some point. I really don't fucking know. I feel like complete garbage regardless. Sorry for such a long rant. I just really needed somewhere to vent where I could remain anonymous. Too long didn't read. I've cut off all contact with my mom, and I just so happened to had been the only family member she still had contact with, and I feel like complete trash over the whole thing. She is entirely responsible for the situation she is in. Manipulative people make others feel guilty when the natural consequences of their own actions come back to bite them. Maybe one day she'll realize that she's the reason everybody abandons her, and then get some help. But you have to take care of yourself. She was willing to sell you out. You owe her nothing. Please don't ever feel bad because you couldn't handle her anymore. I love my religion, but I am tired of feeling like a WG. Summary: I escaped from home after several attempts to reason with my parents. After that, we tried counseling with several professionals to no avail. They tried everything they could to convince me to come back, but it wasn't what I wanted. I knew they would still monitor me and control me, and at 26, I had had enough. It has been a roller coaster, to say the least, and I just can't deal with it, them and their community anymore. I am even tired of having no money because of constant professional sessions. Don't get me wrong, they have worked, but it's expensive. I started dating someone. Yes, we went for walks, dinner, movies, but I got so paranoid every time we went out that I told my parents because many people had seen us together. Not doing anything compromising, but I come from a very judgy and disgusting community, so I knew word was going to get around quickly. I had been so stressed about the entire situation, and I hadn't gotten a break for over 4 months after leaving. I wasn't even leaving my apartment because what will people say from leaving home and being harassed that he invited me to his house at the beach, and I said yes. I went 2 weekends. I have made so many mistakes, and I feel so ashamed for the things I did while I was younger, sneaking out because I wasn't allowed to stay out, going to parties, drinking, etc. But I have left that life behind. That said, I'm not one to upload pictures of myself. If my dad saw a picture of he didn't like or didn't approve, he would text me to tell me to take it down. Mind you, it was never a revealing picture. I wasn't allowed to wear revealing clothes. But one of his family members uploaded pictures of us. In one I was wearing a bikini and I put my arm around him. He didn't reciprocate though. ABD, the other ones were us in the kitchen cooking while at their beach house, and someone sent it to my dad. He came to my apartment to talk about the situation, and he doesn't agree with the situation at all, but is willing to forget about the past, as long as I follow their demands basically, and says he doesn't want to control me. Haha, demands like not going out with mixed gender groups, not going out alone with a man, not going to trips, not wearing certain type of clothes. He has also told me about someone who is interested in me from the community, etc. That I am aware of all that he has agreed, for me even to live alone. When that's not the case, I escaped. Because they wouldn't let me and I financially take care of myself. He has a limit, and that type of behavior he will not accept. They don't respect me, and if those are the types of friendships that I want in my life, I honestly do love wearing clothes that show some skin, and I told my dad that I don't wear that clothes for anyone but myself. I have always wanted to do so. It may seem dumb, but I was never allowed, and I'm a very, very skinny girl, so I have always felt that those clothes don't look vulgar on me, and he told me that that's not what God teaches and that it does look vulgar. And that if I like to wear those types of clothes, then I need to look inside and assess myself. If a guy from the community, and then he said in general, sees that image of me in a bikini, they are not going to think, oh, she's smart, but oh, she's so hot, and do I really think that I can only offer that when I am so smart? That the guy I'm dating is a coward because my dad asked him not to tell me because I was confused, and he did, and he also told him to respect me, and he hasn't. He said that if I wanted to marry a convert, he is not against it, but I need to go back home for at least 3 months while he goes through the process, and then we can get married, but to know that our relationship will change and it will never be the same, and for us to figure it out financially, but that he will be very disappointed because it's the RTE lifestyle that I really want for myself. To let him know what I want, because if that's what I want, then he has reached his limit. They think I'm selfish and I only think of myself and no one else. Finally, to talk to my therapist and let her know he thinks that I just tell her my version, and to let her know all the truth, and then to tell him what she told me to see if she agrees with him. I'm so tired of feeling like a bad person, of feeling so ashamed, of feeling not good enough, of them making me feel like I can't make my own decisions, and I realize my dad is the reason for my low self-esteem, of feeling like a WE, and that I have to be this perfect being because otherwise I'm not cut out for anything in life, especially marriage. I can't take it and them anymore. Sounds like it's time for no contact. Your parents will never let you have peace, and by continuing to allow them in your life, you are allowing them access to you to hurt you and control you. As long as you are still taking their phone calls and accepting their visits, they see it as an opportunity to convince you to let them control you again. Getting your own place and financially supporting yourself is huge, and congratulations for that. The hardest part is getting out to begin with. But until you set this boundary and stick to it, example, if you continue to shame me for having a relationship, I will no longer accept your calls. They will keep pushing. They will kick and scream and cry and make a huge scene. But ultimately you left that group, which sounds like a cult anyway, for a reason. Why do you still care what they think of you? Don't take criticism from anyone you would not go to for advice. You know what will make you happy and how you want to live your life. You've already taken the first and biggest steps. Now go see it through. Step into your future. They can move forward with you or cling to the past and remain there. Stop speaking to your parents. Go no contact. That is the only way you will get out of this endless cycle of anxiety over trying to please them, and in doing so letting them completely control your life. This is your life, not theirs. You can and should live it as you want to live it. Otherwise, you will look back in 20 years and realize just how much of your life you have allowed your parents to waste, and you're never getting those years back. Do you have a support system of friends who could help you talk you through this? Talking to a therapist could also be very beneficial. Thanks for watching Tales Beyond Threads. If you enjoyed the stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest tales. See you next time.